It's kind of wild, right? Like how even when we're surrounded by, I don't know, all the good and bright stuff, we still gravitate towards the shadows. The creepy stories, the mysteries, those just seem to get under our skin in a way that nothing else can.
It's true. It's more than just a morbid fascination, though, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's like these darker stories, they're almost like a reflection of our own deepest fears, the anxieties we all share but don't always talk about.
Exactly. They're like a peek behind the curtain of, well, everything we think we know and understand. Which brings us to today's deep dive. We're going to unpack two stories. One about a song so shrouded in sadness it's been called the Hungarian Suicide Song. And the other, well, let's just say even the happiest place on earth has a dark side.
And that's the thing about these stories, it's not even about whether they're true or not. It's about the very real psychological effect they have. It's like they tap into something primal, something that makes us afraid of what we can't understand.
Okay, so let's start with Gloomy Sunday. The source material paints a pretty bleak picture of 1930s Hungary. I mean, you've got the Great Depression, the looming threat of war. It was already a time of incredible uncertainty and tension, and then this melancholic melody hits the airwaves, and boom, a wave of suicides follows.
It's crucial to remember the historical context, though, right? I mean, Hungary, like most of the world back then, was like a tinderbox, right? Socially, politically, economically, suicide rates were already high.
Mhm.
What's interesting is how this one song became so intertwined with this really dark chapter.
It's almost like it became this focal point for all that anxiety, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. And this is where the whole idea of psychological contagion comes in, right?
Mhm.
The theory is that exposure to suicide, especially when it's highly publicized or like emotionally charged, can actually increase the risk of suicidal behavior in people who are already vulnerable.
So it's not so much that the song caused people to take their own lives, but that for some, it might have been a tipping point, like the final straw.
Exactly. It's a complex issue.
Yeah.
And you can't just say A caused B, but there's this eerie correlation you can't ignore. I mean, the source material describes how many of the suicides involved the song playing, even people clutching the lyrics. And then there's the composer himself.
Reserceris,
Yes, yes. Years after writing Gloomy Sunday, he also died by suicide.
which just adds to the whole legend of the song being cursed, right? It's like a self-fulfilling prophecy.
It's chilling when you think about it that way, and it speaks to how powerful stories are, how they take on a life of their own, and then actually influence how we see and react to, like, real events.
And it didn't stop there. Gloomy Sunday eventually made its way to America, and so did its dark reputation.
It did, and here's the thing. This is the 1950s and 60s, a period of relative peace and prosperity compared to war-torn Europe.
So why the same pattern? Why would a song so connected to the despair of 1930s Hungary resonate with Americans a couple of decades later?
That's the question, isn't it? Some psychologists at the time actually advised people against listening to the song, especially in a language you understand, because they thought the combination of the somber music and those, heavy lyrics could actually worsen negative emotions in people who are already struggling.
It's wild, isn't it? Like music can just get under your skin like that.
It really is. It's powerful stuff. But let's shift gears a bit now from the haunting melodies of Gloomy Sunday to, well, a different kind of darkness. We're heading into Disney territory.
Right, because even the happiest place on earth can't escape the shadows completely, can it?
Nope, not at all. And the story we're about to dive into, well, it's a chilling one, an urban legend that's been floating around among Disney animators and, those hardcore Disney fans for years.
All right, lay it on me. What's the story behind this mysterious Disney legend?
Okay, so picture this. A Buena Vista producer, let's just call him Tom for now, he's working on this anniversary DVD project for Mickey Mouse, right? And he's got to go through hours and hours of these old animation reels, like way back to the early days of Mickey.
We're talking like black and white, pie-eyed Mickey.
Exactly, before he was a global icon. So Tom's going through these reels, and he comes across one simply labeled Mickey Mouse in the City. Sounds harmless enough, right? Just a basic animation of Mickey walking through a city backdrop on loop. But here's where it gets weird.
Okay, I think I can see where this is going, but go on.
Well, the reel, it's way longer than it should be for such a simple animation. Like, Tom starts digitizing the footage, and it just keeps going and going. And as he's watching this seemingly innocent scene, it starts to, well, unravel.
Unravel how? Give me the creepy details.
So the music, it starts out as, your typical cheerful Disney tune. But then it slowly starts to distort, like almost demonic. Imagine those happy-go-lucky melodies twisting into this cacophony of unsettling sounds like something out of a horror film.
Oh yeah, that's creepy. But what about Mickey? He's just walking, right?
Not exactly. See, that's the really messed up part. Mickey's grin, that iconic grin that's supposed to be, all about joy and innocence, it starts to distort, widens, gets all exaggerated, grotesque almost. The source material actually uses the word obscene.
Whoa. Okay, that's just wrong.
And then the animation itself starts to get all messed up. The lines get jagged, the background warps and distorts, and the whole thing becomes incredibly unsettling, like watching reality itself breaking down. And Mickey's right there in the middle of it, his smile, this horrifying mockery of, everything it's supposed to represent.
I can totally see why this story has become legendary. So, what happened? Did Tom ever figure out what he was looking at?
Well, if the legend to be believed, Tom was so freaked out by what he'd seen, he actually stopped the playback before the reel ended. Couldn't even bring himself to watch the whole thing. But then, I don't know, maybe curiosity got the best of him, or maybe just morbid fascination. But he calls in his assistant, right? Asks him to watch the rest, take notes on anything else unusual.
Ooh, that's just asking for trouble, man. Never send an intern to do a creepypasta's work. But seriously, what happened to the assistant?
Well, that's where the story takes an even darker turn. It
Yeah.
goes from urban legend to something, well, far more sinister. Because according to the story, the assistant who actually watched the whole thing, the whole descent of Mickey into darkness, he was later found dead. Suicide.
Are you serious? No
But
way.
as if that wasn't chilling enough, the story goes that his suicide note, it just had one cryptic message: the disasters that are to come.
Man, chills, literal chills. I can see why this story stuck around. But why are we so drawn to these kinds of stories? These creepypastas that take something familiar, something we trust, and twist it into something dark and disturbing? What's the appeal? I mean, it seems kind of backwards, doesn't it? We look to things like Disney for comfort, for escape, and then we're drawn to the very thing that kind of messes with that feeling of safety.
Yeah, and I think that's part of what makes it so powerful.
Mm.
It's that subversion of what you expect. I mean, we're naturally afraid of the unknown, sure, but there's this whole other level of unsettling when it's something familiar that becomes menacing. Like it's like a glitch in the system, right? That crack in the everyday that
Yeah.
makes you question if anything's as solid as you thought.
And those creepypastas, they often exploit that, don't they? They take the things we trust the most, like, I don't know, children's entertainment, beloved icons, and because they hold such a special place for us, they're ripe for that kind of subversion.
Totally. Think about the common threads in these stories, right?
Hmm.
Forbidden knowledge, hidden truths, the whole idea that there's something sinister lurking behind something that seems totally innocent. Those are primal fears, right?
Yeah.
Deep-seated anxieties about order and chaos and whether anything's truly safe.
Like a kind of cultural shadow work, almost. We shine a light on the darkest parts of our imaginations, and we face those fears through telling stories about them.
That's a really cool way to put it. And it kind of gets to the heart of why these urban legends and folklore persist.
Hmm.
They might change with the times, but their purpose stays the same. To help us wrap our heads around the things we don't understand, to make sense of the world, even if it means finding a weird sort of comfort in shared anxiety.
So, as we wrap up this deep dive into the dark side of music and myths, I gotta ask you, which one really stuck with you? The haunting melody with those real life tragedies, or the Disney creepypasta that twists this iconic image?
Well, they're both super unsettling, each in their own way, right? But I think what's really fascinating is how they both show the link between stories, our minds, and our culture as a whole. Gloomy Sunday reminds us how music can really get to us emotionally, while the Disney story, that speaks to our fascination with the hidden darkness and familiar things.
And maybe, just maybe, they both remind us that the line between what's real and what's made up, well, it's not always so clear cut. The stories we tell ourselves, the ones we share and fear, they show us something important about being human. We crave understanding, even when it comes to the darkest corners of existence. So, next time you hear a familiar tune or see a character you love, remember there might be more to the story than meets the eye. What's hidden beneath the surface? Well, that's up to you to decide.